When we think of castles, we usually picture images of grandeur and romance, something straight out of a fairy tale. Something usually involving princes and princesses, knights and dragons, and battles for honor. But not all castles are straight out of a fairy tale. Some are straight out of your nightmares, shrouded in chilling histories of bloodshed, cruelty, and unfathomable horror. Places where merciless rulers ruled with an iron fist, where torture and execution were commonplace, and where one fortress was built not to keep the enemy out, but to imprison something within. Today we're going to explore my top 3 picks for the world's most haunted castles, whose realities are far darker than any fairy tale we know. Up first is Leap Castle in Coolderry, Ireland. Leap Castle is thought to have been constructed in the early 1500s by the O'Bannon clan and has been associated with death and bloodshed before the first stone was ever even placed. According to legend, 2 brothers from the O'Bannon clan were fighting over who got to be the leader, and the only thing they could think of in order to settle this argument was to do something so bold that would show their bravery to everyone. The chosen feat was to jump off of a rocky cliff in the location where the castle was slated to be built. And whichever brother survived the fall earned the right to be leader of the clan. And even though the O'Bannons built Leap Castle, the O'Carrolls were the overall ruling clan of the area. And because the castle was so well constructed, the O'Carrolls took it from the O'Bannons and used it as their primary stronghold. The O'Carrolls themselves were not nice, and it's said that they would kill anybody that got in their way of total domination of the area, including each other. At one point, it said that there was a nasty rivalry that took place between 2 brothers of the O'Carroll clan. And the fight was over leadership of the clan, because at the time, the current leader had just passed away. And it said that as one of the brothers was giving a sermon to some members of the clan in the chapel of Leap Castle, the other brother burst through the doors in the middle of the sermon and stabbed him. The slain brother then fell onto the altar and died in front of the family, leaving that part of Leap Castle to forever be called the Bloody Chapel. There are numerous reports of haunting and paranormal activity in Leap Castle. And with a history like that, I'm sure none of you are surprised. Some of the main claims are seeing the apparition of the Red Lady, who's thought to have been a victim of the brutality of the O'Carrolls. People say they see her walking around the halls clutching a knife to her chest. There are also tons of claims of paranormal activity in that Bloody Chapel, one of which is seeing the apparition of the slain brother. The other is hearing the screams of the forgotten prisoners in the oubliette, which is a dark and infamous dungeon within the chapel where prisoners were said to be put and then forgotten. Number 2 on our list is Musham Castle in Austria. Musham Castle has been around for a very long time, and there are documents that reference the site all the way back to 1191. Musham sits at a very high vantage point in the mountains of Utenberg, Austria. It's said to have been built on the foundation of an old Roman fortress. And in its lifetime, Musham Castle has become no stranger to bloody battles and conflicts in the area. And even though Musham Castle has seen its fair share of bloodshed over the years, nothing compares to the horrific events that occurred during the witch trials in the late 1600s. The Jackal trials lasted from 1675 to 1690. And the results were the torture and execution of 139 people, many of which were children. The methods they used for torture and execution were horrific, even for that time. After the witch trials, Musham kind of went back to normal. That was until about 1790, when funding to the castle was cut off, and with no source of income to keep up the place, the walls just started to crumble. It was at that time that locals started to notice that cattle and wildlife like deer were turning up dead around the grounds. And when they investigated, the carcasses looked like they had been attacked by wolves. And who knows if it's because of the bloody history of the castle or just the fact that it looked so creepy and run down. But for whatever reason, the locals decided at that time that the residents inside Musham had to be werewolves. Because of course, what else could kill the cattle and the deer? So the villagers all got together, rounded up the inhabitants of Musham Hall, and then executed them brutally for their lycanthropic crimes. Today, Musham Castle is open to the public for tours, and there are many claims of paranormal activity within the halls. Some have reported hearing the disembodied screams of the accused witches, or even seeing the apparitions of the victims of torture roaming the halls. And some say there are even werewolves stalking the grounds of Musham at night. Number 3 is Hradhouska Castle in the Czech Republic. Hradhouska Castle was most likely built in the later part of the 13th century. And it's very different from the other castles because there's no real solid reason why it was built. It doesn't have any external fortifications to keep it safe. It's located in a barren part of the mountains that doesn't even have access to running water. There's no kitchen to cook and store food. All around, it has no real strategic advantage. Instead, the castle was built around this giant gaping hole in the earth, which really got people talking. Like, why would you do that? It's not safe. And it seems a little extreme to build a castle around a hole. But the unusual choice of location really provided a lot of fuel for very creepy stories coming out of that hole. The giant hole itself is known as the gateway to hell in the area. And there are legends saying that locals have seen animal, human-like creatures crawling out of the depths of the hole. There's also stories of a tunnel system and secret rooms under the castle that have non-human remains in them. I read a story about a noble family that lived at Hradhouska one time that was into the dark arts and used to perform experiments on prisoners. One of the things they would do is offer these prisoners a full pardon if they agreed to be lowered down into the hole and then report back to them what they saw. One story says they lowered a prisoner down into the hole, and as they got down further and further and further, all of a sudden they started to hear the prisoner screaming for help. He needed to be pulled out. Pull me out now. And as they're pulling him up out of the hole, they can continue to hear him scream for help. When they finally got the prisoner out of the hole, they asked, "What did you see down there?" And the prisoner was unable to articulate anything. He had gone mad while in the hole. He appeared to have aged significantly and his hair turned bright white. During World War II, the Nazis occupied Hradhouska Castle for no real reason. Remember, there was no strategic advantage to being in this castle. So why did the Nazis occupy it? And apparently there were multiple reports of the Nazis performing similar dark art rituals in the castle. Some stories say they were trying to harness whatever energy it was that was coming out of the gateway to hell. And the castle's own website, which will be linked down in the description, states that architects have said the castle appears to have been built not to keep enemies out, but to keep something in. Hradhouska Castle was open to the public for tours in the 90s and has skyrocketed to the top of my Eastern European bucket list. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And leave a comment down below of some of your favorite spooky castles or haunted locations.